Imagine you are sitting in a large, dark room. At the far end, you see shadowy images of people you know to be long dead. They move and speak as if they were still living, yet remain totally oblivious to you. The next night, you return to that same room, and again, those shadowy forms repeat the same actions. An eerie and disturbing idea, unless you realize that the darkened room is a movie theater, and the ghosts simply shadows on a silver screen. The parallel between cinema and ghosts goes both ways. Parapsychologists suggest that many classical hauntings might be a spectral form of motion picture, a sort of ectoplasmic theater. Imagine an uneasy spirit like a soulless hologram, doomed to repeat mindlessly the same movements and words for all eternity.
There's a fascination like going to the dentist when you have a tooth pulled, and then you put your tongue over where the tooth used to be, and you taste your own mortality, don't you? The taste of blood, huh? So you've got to be curious. Someone asked me at a lecture a couple of years ago, why do you write so much about death? I said, because I'm alive, huh? So you have the two mysteries, the mystery of life on the earth. We know very little about the history of ourselves, seeing as how the earth came out of the sun and cooled for billions of years before we appeared. That mystery, and then the mystery of death, huh? So we're encompassed, Shakespeare put it beautifully, we're passing through time to eternity, huh? Passing through time, this little span of life that we have, and then suddenly eternity. So that's why we're interested.
It's coming from downstairs.
It comes from everywhere and nowhere.
In earlier times, ghost movies seldom relied on gore or on-screen cadavers. Indeed, some of the best films featured no real ghost at all. The Uninvited was one of the most effective ghost stories ever filmed, a well-made chiller with a rather cerebral approach to house haunting.
Stella, what is it?
Are you ill, Stella?
Quiet. Leave her alone.
Oigan. Oigan.
Stop her, Scott. Shh. She's in a trance. I saw this happen once before at a seance. I thought it was a fake.
But this isn't.
I know. It's dangerous.
Please get out of this house now.
Now lie there quietly. I'm not afraid of anything here.
Then be afraid. Be afraid for heaven's sake. When you were a little child, the evils of this house reached out for you. Stella! Go! Go!
The Curse of the Cat People isn't what it sounds like at all. It's actually a sensitive ghost drama about a little girl whose parents fear for her sanity.
Do you know why I came to you, Wayne? Because you called to me, like him, so that your childhood could be bright and full of friendliness. But you must promise never to tell anyone about it.
Not even Daddy or Mommy?
No.
Luton was a very, very well-educated man with great sensitivity and great taste. And the last thing in the world he would want to have made was something called Curse of the Cat People. But the front office was insisting on this. They kept twisting his arm and twisting his arm and pushing him, so finally he had to give up and give in. So he created something that could be called Curse of the Cat People. We got enough horror stuff written into it, scare stuff, to maybe barely qualify as a horror film, but what it really was the most interesting study in child psychology, and family, particularly father not understanding this little imaginative little girl. And I'll never forget when we finished the picture, we took it out to ran it for some parent-teachers groups and for child psychologists. They all loved the film, but they said, "What's it doing with that awful title?" Of course, the title's what started it.
If that child comes here again, I'll kill her. this, I'll kill her.
Mrs. Sarah! Mrs. Sarah! Sarah!
Little girl. I have to hide you. I have to hide you, little girl. My little girl is in her room, waiting to kill you.
Much nonsense can be done with it, but basically I meant to think that we are only made of this body and there is no soul that motivates us. That is so foreign to me as anything else, as it is foreign to some people who don't believe in it.
Turhan Bey appeared in The Amazing Mr. X, which dealt with fake seances and phony ghosts.
You're not exactly welcome here. Where's Emily? It's Thursday, Mr. Abbott. Her day off. Where's Frida? Frida left yesterday. She said she thought the house was haunted. And I can see what she means.
It was a very short schedule, I think 10 days. And with a very good cast. But actually the picture was based on that one character, even though he didn't have too much to do in it, but it was just the problem of a phony spiritualist to redeem himself at the end, sacrifices himself and his life to save his friends from a fate worse than death, as we used to say.
What are you so startled about? You're used to raising the dead, aren't you? Although I guess with me it was a little easier, because I'm only legally dead.
Ambiguity and unseen terror also lurked in the film adaptation of Shirley Jackson's novel, The Haunting of Hill House.
I know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
Now look, Doc, we're buddies, okay? But don't try to convert me.
I'm trying to prepare you.
So a review of the book, and I checked to find out it was available, because usually when a book's coming out, if it happens to be a hot property, the big companies have an office in New York, and they see a manuscript, and they pick it up before anybody, we small guys can get a hold of it. But this was free. So I went up to Hollywood Boulevard, got a bookstore, got a copy of the book to read. And I remember I was sitting in my office, and I had Nelson Gidding, a writer, working on another thing for me, office across the way. And I was there just in the middle of a kind of hair-raising sequence, and my hair bristles going up and down my neck here, and Nelson burst in to ask me a question, and I jumped about 3 feet off that couch, and I thought to myself, boy, if this can do this to me just reading the book, it's got to be one hell of a picture in there. That's what started the whole thing.
Stop it! God. Whose hand was I holding?
Did you hear me calling?
Oh, this house. You have to watch it every minute.
I wanted to get extreme angles I could. This was one of the early films of Panavision. Bob Gottschalk, who originated Panavision, I knew personally. But I think about the widest angle they had at that time, we're going back to the early 60s, was about a 35.
My name's Marquis, Dr. Marquis, a scientist interested in the supernatural, the unnatural, if you like.
I've had more people say to me over the years, Mr. Wise, you made the scariest picture I've ever seen. You didn't show anything. How did you do it? Time and again I've gotten it. That goes back to Luton. Fear of the unknown.
Less ambiguous, but no less terrifying, was Legend of Hell House, adapted by Richard Matheson from his own novel.
What in the name of God?
I wrote a scene in my novel Hell House. They made the picture Legend of Hell House, but they didn't do this particular scene. And it was so scary that I had the chills while I was writing it, and when I finished it, I just said to myself, oh, wow, all alone in my office. And it was just about this doctor, this parapsychologist, who was in a steam room because he has a bad leg, and then there's something in the steam room with him, which I never described.
Inside me, even as I'm speaking to I can feel him just waiting in there to take over.
Interestingly enough, I never read the script. He would give me the next day's pages. And it was scary. I found it very scary and very haunting.
Murder, vampirism, cannibalism, drug addiction, alcoholism, sadism, mutilation.
How did it end?
If it had ended, we would not be here.
The archetypical haunted house was often the location for murder. By the 1950s, this cliché was played with masterly tongue-in-cheek by Vincent Price.
I'm Vincent Price, and you're invited to my party in the house on Haunted Hill, where so far the ghosts have murdered only 7 people. So won't you come and make it 8? You'll see human heads without bodies.
No.
Are you ready, dear?
Yes, damn you.
Pritchard, if you know where she is, you better tell me now.
She's gone. She's gone with them. And there's nothing you can do about it.
Where is she? Where is she? You buried your own sister alive.
I did. But she's dead now.
The ghosts were psychological, not spectral, in Edgar Allan Poe's story, The Fall of the House of Usher, brought to the CinemaScope screen in 1960.
Hollywood does have a tendency to repeat its successes. When I was young and when I was starting, you didn't have the idea of Rocky I, Rocky II, Rocky III, and so forth. What you did another film along a similar line. So when I did Edgar Allan Poe's Fall of the House of Usher, and it was successful, I didn't do Fall of the House of Usher Part 2. I did Edgar Allan Poe's The Pit and the Pendulum.
The Pit and the Pendulum supposedly stretched Poe's short story of the same name to feature-length proportions. What the film actually did was stretch the meager resources of its production budget. Whatever the budget lacked in dollars, Vincent Price more than made up for with his enjoyably over-the-top performance.
Do you know where you are, Bartholomew? You are about to enter hell. I'm going to torture you, Isabella. I'm going to make you suffer for your faithlessness to me. You harlot!
Tales of Terror was another entry in Roger Corman's Poe series that cast Vincent opposite Peter Lorre and Basil Rathbone. The ghost element in this trilogy of short stories was made that much more atmospheric by Price's performance.
What kind of a man are you anyway? Make love to my wife and doesn't even talk to me.
You're insane.
That may be, but very clever.
Help! Help!
The success of Tales of Terror prompted a follow-up of sorts, Twice Told Tales, another ghost party starring Mr. Price.
He had a major domo that went everywhere with him, took care of his house, blah, blah, blah. And of course, most of the movies that Vince did were these wonderful old houses with these wonderful antiques and things like that, you know. So they would build this set, and before they filmed, Vince would come in with his major domo, and he would look at that lamp, and he would go, and then he would look at that chair, and he'd go. And when the picture was finished, those things were gone. Gone. You know, the chandelier, they were gone, you know. I never did see his house, but I must have been magnificent. And I think the producers knew that he was doing that, but, you know, they never told him that they knew.
Price's most memorable ghost opus was The Tomb of Ligeia, also made by Corman.
You must trust me. Give over your will to mine. No harm will come to you.
give over your will to mine.
In The Terror, a Gothic ghost story directed by Roger Corman, ambiguity played a prominent part, but not intentionally.
So we came up with the storyline of The Terror, and I was finishing the Raven, I think, by Wednesday, and I felt I can shoot 2 days on these sets, Thursday and Friday. So I said to Leo, write only the scenes that are in the Great Hall and one other room of the castle. I'll shoot that. And I then went to Jack Nicholson, who was in the picture and was a friend of mine. I said, Jack, you can have the lead in the picture.
What is it? That light there. That's the Baroness's bedroom in the tower. The room's been sealed ever since that night. Not even the Baron would enter.
Come with me.
Baron, you mustn't go down there.
Everybody gets their shot of me. Take a shot of Dick, hit him with the chains. Even the birds came down. I mean, like when the old lady, the witch, when she starts hitting me, and Jack starts hitting me, I mean, and Boris starts hitting me, everybody in this picture. The only part that I couldn't understand was that everything happened at once at the end. You know, it wasn't like get hit at the beginning, get hit in the middle. No, at the end, everybody starts taking their pokes at me.
In Hamlet, Shakespeare calls death the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveller returns. Yet in the same play, Hamlet's dead father returns from that undiscovered country, demanding revenge for murder most foul. The concept of unearthly revenge is as old as history. In The Skull, I tried to warn Peter Cushing about the ghastly legacy of the Marquis de Sade's spirit, to no avail.
I found in the morning that the skull had been removed. Who removed it? Those who use its power. Invisible beings, spirits from a strange, evil world.
Films like this one were cheaply produced, but they still delivered what fans really wanted. Plenty of atmosphere and decidedly creepy characters. Not surprisingly, the critics appreciated little about this film upon its initial release. It wasn't until years later that the movie was actually recognized as a classic of the genre.
I know I used to get amazed at watching Vince. Between every take, he's over either sleeping or reading a pulp magazine.
This night onward, you shall bear my curse. Burn him! Surely after all these years, I'm entitled to a few small amusements.
As in reality, film tales of ghosts can be terrifying or strangely reassuring. Most of us believe that things like love do not end at death. Some years ago, a certain Contessa Carandini, Marchesa di Sarzano, lay on her deathbed. Her husband predeceased her by a number of years. She looked beyond those present, her children and grandchildren in the room. Her expression softened. She said only one word, Frank, and she closed her eyes. Now, some might say she was suffering from delusions. Others would explain it as an hallucination brought on by painkillers. Some might believe that at the end she saw the one man she had loved all her life beckoning her to join him. I know what I believe. The lady was my grandmother, and her husband's name, and indeed I was named after him as well, was Frank Carandini.